Let's start with, and I'll just go name by name since I got the list here. Anne.
Hi, all. Ann Dunno here for introductions. I see a couple new faces. So I'm the capital project manager at Mountain Line / NAPTA, and been on TAC for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, something like that. So nice to see some new faces. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Anne. Go, Brendan.
Hey, good afternoon. Brendan Foley, Assistant District Engineer with ADOT North Central District. Good to see you.
Excellent. Thank you, Brendan. Appreciate that. All right. Next, Dan.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dan Folk. I'm the Community Development Director for the City of Flagstaff. I have been on TAC for probably 8 years at this point. We're going to be introducing one of our new team members, and I'm going to be shifting my seat over to Michelle here. So we'll get to her introduction here in a minute. So this might be my last TAC meeting for a while, and I'm feeling all verklempt about it. Is that the right word?
Oh, we're going to miss you, Dan. Okay.
No, I do enjoy TAC.
Gotcha.
I really do. I really enjoy working with transportation folks, and TAC has been a great group. I just have other things I need to do, and typically we want our planning director on the TAC. So that's the only reason I'm giving up my seat. Thank you.
Understood. Well, Dan, why wait? Let's introduce Michelle. Michelle, go ahead.
Do you want to go ahead, Michelle? Why don't you go ahead and I'll fill in the gaps if you leave anything out.
Sounds good. I had to remember to unmute myself. I'm Michelle McNulty. I'm the new planning director. I just relocated from Anchorage, Alaska. I was a consultant for 10 years, and then I was the planning director for the municipality of Anchorage for the last 3.5. And in that capacity, our MPO actually was within the planning department, and I sat on the TAC in the similar capacity. So it's my first TAC meeting, but I do have some experience.
Excellent. Well, welcome to the TAC, Michelle. We definitely appreciate having you and look forward to working with you. So thank you.
And I'll just,
Thank you.
All right.
let me interrupt here because I always love to add this tidbit of information about Michelle. So Michelle, she may look familiar to some of you. She did go to school here in Flagstaff at NAU. She got her master's degree, and she actually had an internship with the city of Flagstaff. She worked for Kim Sharp back in, I think we determined it was 2007. And so she has some familiarity with Flagstaff, and we're so glad to have her here as part of our team. So welcome, Michelle.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate that. All right. Next, Jeff.
Good afternoon, Jeff Bowman. I'm the traffic engineer for Flagstaff. I've been on TAC, I think, a little longer than Dan, so at least 8 years. I don't know when I first started, but welcome all the new faces. Here we go.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. Jenny.
Hi, folks. Jenny Neiman. I am here with the Flagstaff Sustainability Office, and I'm here for just a portion of the agenda today.
Excellent. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate that. Rick.
Hello, Mr. Chair. Rick Barrett. I am the city engineer as well as the engineering director. And do I understand we're trying to talk about how long we've been on the TAC?
Yes, sir.
Wessel, how long have we been doing this?
Forever and a day.
There we go.
I think I literally go back to when we hit 50,000 population and the FMPO was originally formed.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rick. Appreciate that. All right. Let me go for myself too, since we got some new members here. My name is Jason James. Regional Planning Manager for ADOT Multimodal Planning. Been on the TAC for a year now, and was actually working for Northern Arizona COG before coming to ADOT. So definitely familiar with the area. So that's my introduction there. Before we move on to introductions by the MetroPlan staff, was there anyone that I missed? Just want to make sure I'm getting everyone's introduction. Not hearing anything? Okay, let's move on to MetroPlan staff introductions. Let's start with Mandia.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mandia Gonzalez. I am the transportation planner here at MetroPlan and the newest addition to this lovely family. So thanks for having me. And I see some familiar faces out there, so it's good to see you all.
Excellent. Thank you, Mandia. Appreciate it. Dave.
Yeah, good afternoon. David Wessel, Planning Manager with MetroPlan.
Excellent. Thank you, Dave. And last but definitely not least, Miles.
Thank you, Jeff. Miles Beck, and Executive Director of MetroPlan. Glad to be here. And Jason, you do a great job sharing. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. Excellent. So that concludes roll call. Let's move on to item C, preliminary general business. Public comment. Was there anybody from the public that likes to make a comment today? That's in the meeting right now. And not hearing any. And Miles, did we receive any public comments that we need to address for this TAC meeting?
We did not.
Okay, excellent. So moving on to item D, approval of minutes for November 17th, 2021. The meeting minutes were included in your agenda packet. Were there any comments, any revisions for the meeting minutes? Hearing none, looking for a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of, was it November 17, 2021?
Yes, sir. All right, got a motion, looking for a second.
I'll second. This is Ann.
Okay, thank you, Ann. All in favor of approving the meeting minutes dated November 17th, 2021, please say aye.
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 All opposed? All right, motion carries. Meeting minutes have been approved. Next item, the consent agenda. Miles, did we have anything on the consent agenda that we need to talk about or approve for today?
We do not.
Okay, excellent. So moving on to general business, item A, starting with the downtown mile fiscal year 22 budget update. Miles, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the TAC. This update is done, it's a little bit unorthodox, and I'm going to share the background, tell you the reason why, and then take feedback from the group. First of all, this budget adjustment item does tie to our strategic work plan in terms of supporting the Milton Railroad underpass. And when we put our work plan together, we got very clear that the Milton Railroad underpass was an important project and that we should consider all the other projects in that area, like the DCC and the Rio de Flag. And MetroPlan, typically, as the group knows, we provide we have a strategic work plan we put together every year, and we tie our work back to our mission and our vision. And in the last round, we identified West Route 66 and the Lone Tree Traffic Interchange as a couple of the projects. And I'm making the case, I made the case in this staff report and made the case to the board of directors to reprioritize $310,000 of MetroPlan funds and move them to the downtown mile plan. I do want to point out, we had already budgeted $180,000 to the plan. And by shifting an additional $310,000, we get $490,000, so almost $500,000. And the reason for that shift, important, urgent, and because it's highly leveraged. And I go into each of those points on the staff report. I'll hit them briefly here. I think everybody in the room knows how critical the Rio to Flag project is in terms of flood control, and the $60 million, roughly $60 million that's on the table from the Army Corps of Engineers. So all these other transportation projects are kind of stacked up behind with the Rio project. So it's, although MetroPlan is not a flood control organization in any way, by supporting this project, we are also supporting the other projects getting through the pipeline. It's also urgent because there's $52 million is the number I used in the staff report that's available from the Corps of Engineers. And there's risk of catastrophic flooding. So there's a lot of reasons, and I've heard from the city that this is really priority one for them. And a flood could happen, money could be moved, and it's just a matter of getting it done. And then the money is highly leveraged. So about $150 million in the projects. And then I've listed under the third bullet some sub bullets of where all that money is coming from and how many different partners are vested in the effort. So there's also the possibility that by doing this planning work, more funding can come to the projects through the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And by getting the planning work done, we may be poised to pursue more capital construction funding. So a couple of considerations. The MetroPlan board did approve shifting the funds to this plan. Based on the understanding the city of Flagstaff would lead the project, MetroPlan would support it. So this means city of Flagstaff is providing local match to draw down the funds, is going to pursue the consultant, manage the project. We'll provide technical leadership support as we can, as appropriate. It's kind of the role we've been playing over the past year or so. And then there's the West Route 66 plan has an impact. Shifting funds out of the West Route 66 plan to the downtown mile obviously takes money away from a project we've prioritized. And I'm really pleased to say that with Mandia here as a new planner, Dave and his time and expertise has said to me, we can still advance these projects by taking some of this work in-house and by also folding some of it into the overall stride forward plan that we're doing. Not as much as we would have done otherwise, but they're not going to just stall out. And similar to the Lone Tree traffic interchange project. On balance, it came down to the urgency and the importance and the highly leveraged nature of the downtown mile projects. I made this recommendation to the MetroPlan board following meetings with the city. And there was one in particular with the city, the Corps, BNSF, and city elected officials. And then I shared the staff report with some of the people in the room at the city before I sent it to the MetroPlan board to make sure we were copacetic. I want to acknowledge I didn't share it with all of the other members. So ADOT, Coconino County, NAU, NAPTA, you didn't have a chance, and I just want to own that, to weigh in as a TAC member and say whether or not you thought this was a good idea. So because of the urgency of it and the way holidays were and the schedule of our meetings and the connection with the city, I just recommended moving the funds, and the board approved that. So the fiscal impacts are, and we can talk about that if you want in the process, and if you feel like the process has been betrayed somehow and you're uncomfortable, I definitely want to hear that feedback. And if you're cool with it, I want to hear that feedback too. So the fiscal impact is lined out here in terms of the match required from the city to draw down these various funds. And I don't have any alternatives because basically, you know, it's already been done. I could conceivably go back to the board of directors and say the technical advisory committee suggested I reverse this. And if I will share that news if that's where the technical advisory committee goes. But ultimately, for all the reasons I said, I just move this one through. And a glossy of the document is in your packet. And with that, I would like to open it up for questions or comments.
Excellent. Thank you, Miles. Any questions, comments, input regarding this update? Go ahead, Ann.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Jeff, or Miles, for kind of outlaying your process that you use to work with the city on shifting the funds and then getting your board approval. As Mountain Line, I did, as a TAC member, hear about this internally as this was being discussed, probably between the November to December timeline, and did get kind of an inquiry here to coordinate with our, Heather and Kate, our GM, in terms of our perspective on shifting the funds from the West Route 66. And Mountain Line was supportive of it, and I believe provided that feedback to you, maybe through the management committee. But I do want to say one thing as someone that implements projects and is tracking our own capital plan here at Mountain Line. As you're aware, our extension of potentially extending Route 8, which is running along West Route 66, we will come up into some challenges in the next few years to be able to actually, we could implement service, but we're only anticipating doing very minor stop improvements because we really don't want to invest in the corridor until we know what the corridor plan is. So I do think it would be valuable discussion, maybe to consider putting the West Route 66. If you're saying that your staff are going to look at this and maybe try to spearhead it somehow and do some work on the planning, which I think sounds like a possibility, but I'd love to hear more about that. Because from a Mountain Line perspective, eventually we're going to need that support to be able to effectively implement transit improvements over the next, 5 years in that corridor. So I just wanted to put that out there. And also I do want to recognize, at one point Mountain Line had, we had considered supporting the plan at the time with some funds, and then that got changed in terms of the direction. And I do think, one of the heads up challenges could be for MetroPlan to try to do some work is that you're not the jurisdictional authority, the ADOT is, and I would be curious to hear that conversation for how you're going to try to work through that to move a plan along. So again, I'm very supportive of the big picture of moving the funds to the downtown mile. I think that's right where MetroPlan's efforts from that regional transportation leveraging leadership is at. But I don't want to lose track of that and kind of bury it under a regional transportation plan. I just want to understand how you're going to work with that. So I'll be quiet now. Thanks.
Can I just confirm? I think maybe the question is going to go to Dave, but it sounds like your question is how will West Route 66 be addressed in light of this shift?
Yes.
Okay.
So I guess the question is going to come to me, so I'll take it. A couple things. I think from a technical perspective, we have the model and the new model and this RTP scenarios that we can build off of and utilize in a West Route 66 study. So I think there's a lot of tools we can, a lot from that tool that we can get. Additionally, we may investigate a micro simulation tool that helps us get into a little more detailed network look. And I think given all the conversation around the Lone Tree Overpass, there may be some value in doing that so we can answer some of those questions that may come up. From a process perspective, we can still engage in a fair amount of public input. And then I'll add, to your last question, how we work with ADOT. I believe there's a lot of lessons to be learned from the Milton and 180 corridor studies. We can revisit those as a group of partners moving forward. And I think one of the takeaways from that process was there's a lot that can be accomplished and needs to be accomplished outside of an ultimate right-of-way by the city, and to the extent that we're extend this study into the county areas in the county. But if there's general agreement on what that kind of right-of-way footprint is, I think there's a lot that can be accomplished in terms of setting a path forward. So I think we can do a fair amount of that, as Miles mentioned, in-house. And if we can, set some of those high-level parameters, it gives our member agencies some good direction to work from. Does that answer your questions?
Yeah, that helps. Thanks, Dave.
Sure.
Excellent. Go ahead, Rick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me get my hand down. Dave, I apologize if I missed this, but do you plan on like pulling the team members together, maybe at a future TAC meeting, and kind of talking about vision and what we'd like the corridor to be?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Barrett, the short answer is yes. We've had some preliminary discussions about West Route 66 in line with your thoughts. We'll resurrect those and revisit those. And then, as I mentioned, we can have a broader public engagement around that same topic.
Yeah, thank you. So with that answer, I just want to acknowledge and appreciate MetroPlan's path forward on this. Obviously, the city's appreciative of the funding associated with Downtown Mile. Disappointment that we couldn't get the RAISE grant or didn't get the RAISE grant, but being able to come up with a path forward, man, oh man, talk about a partnership. So we're really appreciative of MetroPlan's partnership here. And I really look forward to being part of, helping envision what Route 66 ought to be. I think that we can do a lot of work just as members of the TAC to kind of advance this planning effort. So that's awesome. And then I also want to acknowledge, and maybe sorry for a bit of negativity, but I just want to acknowledge that the county and NAU aren't with us today, which is just unfortunate, because I really appreciate, Miles, your approach to just make sure that all member agencies understand what this is and have an opportunity to input and share any comments or thoughts. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Really appreciate that. And Dave, I see your hands up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do want to mention that the RAISE grant is coming back around again very quickly with, I believe, a fairly quick turnaround on award. So we may want to have that conversation again, and perhaps with additional MetroPlan funds in the mix, it might put us in better standing. And there are additional funds, I believe, or at least as many funds, 1.5 billion in that program. So just want to put that on the table, not necessarily for discussion right now.
Okay, thanks, Dave.
Thank you. Any additional comments or input in regards to item A, the Downtown Mile Fiscal Year 22 budget update? And hearing none, that was great comments. Thank you very much. Moving on to item B. And before I move on to item B, by the way, I'd like to recognize Ed Stillings from FHWA. Ed, we do have a new member on the TAC, so if you can unmute yourself, just briefly introduce yourself and how long you've been on the MetroPlan TAC.
Sure. This is Ed Stillings. I am the Senior Transportation Planner for Federal Highway Administration, and we're based out of the Phoenix office. And gosh, I don't know how long I've been. Dave knows this. I've worked with FMPO, and then one of our other planners worked, and then I came back, and so I've been on and off since 1999.
Yeah, a couple reincarnations.
Gotcha. Thank you, Ed. Really appreciate that. Okay, let's move on to item B then, the Transportation Improvement Program TIP amendment. Dave, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have a TIP amendment for your consideration by the board related to some Mountain Line grant awards. You can see that in the recommendation. There's $300,000 for operation support and about $4.4 million for phase one campus bus facility. That's the commercial driver's license test course, CDL test course. And this is really in keeping with investing in time and resources to expand mode choice. This is kind of a standard operating procedure. Mountain Line places these items in the unfunded year of the TIP, that's the year 5, and then applies for these funds. And should they be awarded, and quite often it's not if, but when they're awarded, they do excellent work in pursuing these grants. We move them into the active part of the TIP. And so that's what has happened here. And we're looking for support for the TIP amendment, and look to Member Dunno to see if she has anything she'd like to add to that.
And Ann, was there any further comments you want to add to this?
Thanks, Jason. No, Dave did a great job. No other further additions unless there's questions.
Thank you, Ann. Any questions or comments on this TIP amendment? Rick, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I would move to approve the TIP amendment as presented.
All right, we have a motion to approve. Looking for a second. And I'll jump in. I will second it. So all in favor of approving, all in favor of supporting this TIP amendment, please say aye.
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 All opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it. Thank you, Ann. All right, let's move on to item C. And that would be, sorry for the pause there, just my notes have to cut back up. The Unified Planning Work Program Amendment. Dave, floor is yours again.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This work program amendment is tied very closely to the downtown mile discussion that Miles led earlier. And it's really because of the size and redirection of this motion, felt the need to recognize this in our public facing document, the work program. So we are redirecting $210,000 in surface transportation block grant funds and $100,000 in PL funds to the downtown mile. And then also recognizing our $100,000 in mini grant funds to what we're now calling the Sustainable Transportation Toolbox. It was earlier referred to as, I think, a VMT calculator. And we'll be discussing that a little bit in more detail in another agenda item. And so this is just to be transparent in how we're spending our funds, which funds we're spending. And so again, you can see the measurable objectives from the strategic work plan 16 and 4 relative to the downtown mile and vehicle miles traveled, basically the calculator. So we're looking for support for this work program amendment.
Excellent. Thank you, Dave. Was there any questions or comments on this Unified Planning Work Program amendment?
Mr. Chairman, this is Miles.
Yes, Miles.
I'd like to jump in and appreciate Dave's presentation. And I just want to underscore something that I'm aware of on this. We need to, as Dave said, stay in compliance and transparent and clear with ADOT so that our Unified Planning Work Program says exactly where we're spending our money. And I also want to avoid amending our UPWP every month. And just one of the things I'd like to confirm with city staff in particular, and I think I'll be doing this with the management committee tomorrow as well, just that the local match is there, that the city is moving ahead with this project. Because what I don't want to do is come back in a couple of months and re-amend this money back out and redo the documents again through the ADOT process. So if I could get some assurance, that would be great. Or if the answer is we can't give you that assurance because we're not sure yet, that's okay. But that might mean we don't want to actually amend the document yet. I hope that makes sense. And I'll answer questions if it doesn't.
Okay, any comments from the TAC on Miles' comments there? Just wanted to make sure we're getting input.
It said, Mandy, if you could scroll down a little bit more and you can see the match requirements. And I think that's what exactly what Miles is looking for the city to speak to, that we're going to need, you know, if there's nothing more than the $390,000 plus match spent that $490,000 that the city is prepared to match that at the $36,000 rate.
Thank you, Dave. Any comments from the city on this? I just want to make sure, like I said, we're getting any input if needed.
Mr. Chair, this is Jeff.
Jeff?
Yeah, I am maybe buying time for Rick for a minute because I'm not privy to these conversations completely. So I'm wondering, when I was reading this, this is an IGA, or do we have a process internal already to transfer these funds? Because I hear the urgency, I saw the urgency in the write-up. What are we talking about exactly for the urgency in the process for transferring the funds? And then I don't know if we've identified this total, but I would expect Rick knows.
Well, thanks for your confidence, Jeff. Bauman, that is.
Well, first I had seen this on the agenda, but I'm assuming you've been involved already and you didn't jump in immediately. So I thought I would jump in and ask a question that I had. So yeah, take it away if you know what's going on.
I can't say that I do. You know, I assume that we would use transportation tax funds for this, but I appreciate your question. I don't know when it would be due. Is it in other words, is it a current fiscal year or a future fiscal year? What's the timing of all that? And yeah, I apologize. I'm behind on this one.
Okay, Miles or Dave, if you want to respond to that, please.
Well, I will. And then Dave, I want to know what you think. I heard Jeff Bowman's point as well about how do we move the money, what are the mechanics of this. And what I will say is commit to, we'll find a way to move the money. I have no doubt we can do that. And we're committed to doing it already. The UPWP amendment is just contingent on I just don't want to do the amendment if this money's just going to shift back soon. So that's why I'm looking for a commitment from the city. I think what makes sense, if the TAC is comfortable with it, is a motion, something like support amendment of the UPWP if it's supported by the management committee and the board, something to that effect. How does that, what do you think of that, Dave Wessel?
Yeah, I think that works well. I believe the mechanism will be an IGA between the city and MetroPlan to transfer those funds. And perhaps another option is to, if urgency is not critical, and I know Miles would prefer not to come back repeatedly to the board with this stuff, but we do want to move forward with the VMT calculator, the Sustainable Transportation Toolbox. And so having the opportunity to move that forward today would be perhaps a minimum request, but I do like the idea of a conditional approval based on feedback from the management committee and board. And that does give us some time, not much, to perhaps pursue this, or have the city staff pursue a commitment a little bit more before we go before the board next week. So thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is
Thank you.
Rick again, if I can jump in.
Absolutely.
I kind of feel like this is something we ought to resolve at the TAC level before we ask management and e-board. Hope others would concur with that. And I don't see that as a problem. I see the table. I understand the 36K commitment. I do point out that in item 5 of the report, there's a different local match number. I assume that one's a typo, and that the table is accurate. It's basically half the amount.
Yeah, the table is accurate. My apologies for not catching that, but thank you for catching that for us. We'll make that correction before we go to the board, should we get there.
And this is not something that could be done within kind.
It could be done within kind.
I mean, I'm thinking if we go back to the previous item in regard to West Route 66 planning, there might be an increased level of in-kind above and beyond what Rosie typically does. I don't know if that's an angle that we could pursue that might be helpful here. But you suspect, Dave, this will be an IGA?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So those typically, I mean, we got to start working on it, but yeah, I concur with the contingent approval. I think I'm good with that, and thanks. I appreciate the discussion.
Thank you, Rick. So what I'm hearing then is, and I will just make one final comment too before I put the motion out. Yeah, I would agree with Dave and Miles' assessment as far as just getting this out as soon as possible, because I know with the Unified Planning Work Program Amendment, at least through the ADOT process, it does take a little bit of time. Not too much time, but still takes a little time. So to repeatedly go back to the board and doing this definitely puts a little bit of a of delay in potentially moving some of these projects. So I agree with Miles and Dave. The sooner you can do this, the better. So with that said, unless there's any additional questions or comments on this item, I would actually move to look for a motion to approve the Unified Planning Work Program Amendment contingent on the approval by the Management Committee and Board. Did I say that correctly, Miles?
Works for me if it works for the TAC.
Okay. All right. Excellent. So looking for that motion.
I guess I was confused. You did not make the motion?
Oh, no, I'm looking, yeah, I'm putting it out there for someone to make the motion. Yeah.
So moved. Rick Barrett.
Excellent. Thank you, Rick, and looking for a second.
This is Jeff. I would second.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeff. All in favor of approving the Unified Planning Work Program amendment contingent on approval by the Management Committee and Board, please say aye.
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 And all opposed. Excellent. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you,
let's
Mr.
move
Chair.
on to. No problem. Thank you, Dave. All right, let's move on to item D, the Lone Tree Overpass. Miles, the floor is yours.
Great. Mr. Chair, members of the TAC, I think you're going to enjoy this one. I'm going to ask you to suspend disbelief as I walk you down this path to a conclusion that I think you'll like. This really goes to what is MetroPlan's role? What's our identity? How can we best serve the community and member agencies? So I'm going to tell you this story today. Most of you know the beginning where this Proposition 420 was passed by voters in November 2018. And since that time, the carbon neutrality plan was passed. And council is now considering arguments, and they did last night till after midnight. Several of us were at. They did a week ago and looked at innovative transportation solutions. So they're very focused and giving a lot of attention to this project. As an MPO, we are, as you know, responsible for long-range coordinated transportation planning in the region. We also try to bring money, resources to bear to get projects done that support our member agencies. So our 25-year plan, Blueprint 2040, the Lone Tree Overpass was identified in 2017. And then of course it went to voters and was approved in 2018. And we could just leave it at that, but the plot thickens, or the story gets more interesting in terms of MetroPlan's role perhaps, because some things have shifted in the past couple of years. So there's some bullets here up on the screen. Not only the carbon neutrality plan was approved by voters after Proposition 420 was approved, MetroPlan's now been an independent organization for about 1.5 years. We are in the midst of our next long-range transportation plan known as Stride Forward. That's going to look at the overall transportation system, and we're going to look at an onward model, which is carrying on with things that have been approved and projecting them forward, and then upward, which is perhaps a more innovative or challenging way of looking at some of our projects. I want to point out that the MetroPlan board has 3 city council members on it, and then 2 members of the county board and 1 of Mountain Line Board of Directors, 1 from ADOT. And when I wrote the staff report, council's decision on the design of the overpass are likely going to come months before the Stride Forward plan is completed. I guess I still stand by that projection, although I don't know how it'll play out. And essentially MetroPlan has 2 options for how we could engage in this project. And I've put them under the alternatives. So the first one is MetroPlan could just say, look, we recognize the city of Flagstaff's autonomy. You're going to choose the appropriate design. We support your decision-making process. It recognizes the city is carefully considering the design, and you're looking at all elements of it. I've got to close my office door, excuse me. I'm projecting into the hallway and disturbing other people's work, I'm afraid. So, and I want to say the city is, I've participated in a few meetings already on this and observed, and it's really impressive how much exploration the city is doing. The disadvantage of this alternative would be that, MetroPlan might have a strong opinion on this design and want to consider it. And so stay with me on this, right? Because there's alternatives and I've got considerations at the end. Our vision is create the finest transportation system in the country. An argument could be made, and I want to understand, I am not making that argument right now, but I want to point out an argument could be made that choosing to not provide a recommendation could be seen as a missed opportunity, or even an abdication of responsibility in terms of how projects are designed and being involved in the process. The other thing is, taking that away, just as an organization, our opinion might benefit the decision-making process that one of our member agencies, the city in this case, is in the midst of. So the other alternative is to go ahead and provide a recommendation to the city council on the design. So if we have an opinion, which would be best at creating the finest transportation system in the country, we could express it. The disadvantages are that it could be perceived as an intrusion on a member agency that's capable of making their own decisions without MetroPlan's input. So ultimately, I think these considerations get really to the heart of the meat of this discussion. I really think that our role in the design of any particular transportation project will vary over time and be made on a case-by-case basis. There might be times when we choose to make a specific design recommendation, and there might be times when we stay out of it altogether. When projects are being carefully vetted, and all the sides are being considered and there's good alternatives, we might stand back. On the other hand, if we think there's a missed opportunity or a project that's not being given due attention, we might step in. And when we consider Lone Tree Overpass through the lens of adequate attention, what I want to say very clearly is it's my perspective that the city of Flagstaff is engaging in a very robust discussion. Carefully considering the design, you're bringing in expert resources, you're engaging the community. To me, there doesn't seem to be an imperative for us to be involved or add something that's missing. And when it gets to our vision, creating the finest transportation system in the country, I would argue that it's processes like this one, where you're going deep on a particular project, that's where the definition of finest comes out. Even more so in some ways than in the 25-year plan. This is where, the rubber meets the road, whether that's on a tire, shoe tread, or a car. And then the city is working through that process. Ultimately, what I'm saying here is our role in the decision-making process, it's going to be most effective if it's considered carefully by everybody, the TAC, the management committee, and the board. And that's why I wanted to bring it here today and see what thoughts, this group had. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, thank you, Miles. That was a fantastic update. Appreciate that. Rick, I see your hands up first. Your comments on this presentation.
Thanks. I thought I'd jump in. I hope others will join me here. Again, Miles, I say again because I'm referring to previous items where I want to thank you for your thoughtful agenda item. It means a lot. And to that point, I think, we've been acting as partners for a long time on this. People on this call, I'm sure, recognize how much time and effort's been put into the Lone Tree Corridor. Starting with the excellent work that Mr. Wessel has done through the regional modeling and the various iterations of the RTP that have happened along the way. And I'm just going down the memory lane here for a minute, so bear with me. But then we as partners move forward with Transportation Decision 2018. Those might remember that it was 3 propositions, one for the extension of the city transportation tax, where several projects were specifically called out. John Wesley Powell, West Route 66, Butler and Lone Tree. Prop 420 was specifically the Lone Tree overpass. And then unfortunately, Prop 421 was more buses more often, but the voters did not approve that. So unfortunately, the transportation decision was not approved in the totality as envisioned. But again, the partnership leading up to that was solid. I still feel that it is very appropriate that partners that have had that much skin in the game, if you will, have a voice, have something to say here. Matter of fact, I hope I don't cross a line here, but I would almost expect that you would have something to say. So again, I appreciate the tone. I appreciate the the sensitivity to deferring the decision to the city. Again, much appreciated, but I welcome the voices here. I think council is welcoming the voices also. Testament to the fact that Councilmember Shimoni is reaching out to Dave Wessel. I think there is a strong and solid recognition by the community that this hasn't just been city staff, specifically engineering or capital improvement staff. But yeah, I can leave it there. I think that is all really important. But having one more thought, Mr. Chair, sorry, I'm kind of jumbling around here, but I wonder, coming back to finest transportation system in America, and yeah, that's intended to be inspirational, and it certainly is. Jeff, I think you bring that sort of inspiration to the table. And again, I appreciate and thank you for that. But I can't help but wonder if we build a road that has a failing level of service from day one, did that in fact meet the will of the voters when we were hoping that there was a congestion relief project? We all know the nature of why Lone Tree was proposed by the voters. Unfortunately, it got done before carbon neutrality. We all understand why we're in the boat we're in. And I respect why we're here. I get it. It's all about timing. But coming back to my question, I honestly, from my heart and my soul, wonder if building an intersection and a corridor that has a failing level of service is truly meeting the vision. And would hope you'd have something to say about that. Now, on the other hand, I get it, right? There's carbon neutrality and an active transportation master plan, and a regional plan, and RTP, all speak to the prioritization of bikes and peds in transit. But this concept that cars will have a failing level of service is something that I'm personally struggling with. So I am hopeful that we can find a way to balance these values and not have one of the values be pushed away from the table altogether. So with that, I will shut up and see if anybody else has anything to add. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
No, thank you, Rick. Those are wonderful comments. Thank you very, very much. Before I open it up to the TAC for additional comments and input, I'd like to give Miles an opportunity to respond to some of Rick's comments. Go ahead, Miles.
Yeah, thank you. I think they stand on their own. I don't really have a response. I feel like we are on the same page.
Okay, excellent. Any further comments or input from the TAC in regards to the Lone Tree Overpass presentation? Dan, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, I was on the meeting last night. I didn't participate as a presenter or anything, but I listened to the whole thing past midnight. And yeah, I really appreciate everybody who participated. Dave was really put on the spot defending the transportation model. I thought you did a great job explaining it. But what's interesting about this item on our agenda today is that, council did make a recommendation last night. on what their preferred intersection was. I guess it's just the one intersection, although that does relate to how many lanes are on the overpass, I guess. You know, they were presented with what I thought was an incredible professional information, right, from the design team. I believe it's WSP. I was really impressed with their presentation. You know, it was long, but man, the information that was provided was amazing. And they did address this transformative transportation topic of the previous week, which is, you know, to move away from traditional level of service as a way to do an analysis of a transportation project and really focus on vehicle miles traveled and other kind of what I would call a lot of qualitative type measures rather than the typical LOS. I mean, they were very clearly presented that this option 5 is going to fail on day 1 in 2026. You're going to back up onto Route 66. You're going to back up on Butler. You're going to back up in all directions. And the people who supported it just don't doubt it. They doubt it. They just stated that the model is flawed. They tried to get Dave to somehow say the model's flawed, that it's just wrong. So my point of all this is that I don't think our recommendation matters at this point. I hate to say that. I think the decision's been made. They've had technical experts in front of them telling them what they think their best professional judgment is. Although I don't think we really, I guess last night's presentation really didn't have a recommendation. But the facts were laid out. And the facts they want to embrace are embraced. The facts that they don't want to embrace are ignored, or there were some, I believe, some misstatements made about what was presented to them, about safety in particular, and bicycle pedestrian safety, and what the professional community believes about some of these design features and what provides safety. I'm thinking of the, I won't call it a slip lane. It was the dedicated right turn lane. What did they call that? The
Channelized.
The channelized lane. I was really impressed with that information. I mean, I came away thinking, man, that's a safer way to turn right. But it was immediately discounted by the folks who don't want it, that it's just inherently dangerous. And even though the logic of the engineer explaining it made perfect sense to me as a driver, what you're looking at and the way the design is so key to it, right? And where the stop sign is or the yield sign, all that stuff. So I was so impressed with the presentation, but in the end, you know, I think they went against what the professional transportation planners would recommend. They talked about VMT. They talked about all 5 options and which ones will have a bigger impact on greenhouse gases. And it was just, all that was dismissed, right? As just wasn't even addressed, the impact that was presented on greenhouse gases and which of these options is going to burn more fuel and add more carbon to the atmosphere, because it just didn't align with what was wanted. So I find the discussion to be fascinating. It's appropriate. I'm all in favor of examining how we evaluate transportation projects, but I was a little frustrated last night with the cherry picking of information, and I just came away feeling like it doesn't matter what's presented. Folks have already made up their mind. My other thought on this is, because we have staff on this committee, and we didn't really make a recommendation. I don't know if that was deliberate, if that was directed. I don't want to put our staff, Rick and Jeff, in the position of having to make a recommendation that wasn't presented as part of the project team. So, and frankly, I don't think it matters at this point.
I want to.
So thanks for listening.
Can I clarify a point?
Go ahead, Miles.
Dan, are you asking the question and concerned about city staff being put on the spot through this MetroPlan report somehow?
Well, yeah, this idea that TAC is going to come up with a preferred alternative. We have city staff on the TAC. So I think, is that what you were suggesting, is does TAC want to come up with a preferred alternative and make that recommendation to the city?
No, I appreciate right now, I appreciate that question. It's a really important clarification.
All right.
All I'm getting at right now is, does the TAC think that MetroPlan has a role in offering an opinion on this project? This isn't what that opinion might be. It's whether or not we even have a role to suggest one.
Yeah. I mean, the natural progression of that would be you would want to hear from your TAC, right? And then you'd want to hear from your board. Or are you just going to make your own freestanding recommendation from your professional staff, which, I mean, I certainly wouldn't oppose it. I don't know what the past history's been on FMPO or MetroPlan reviewing capital project design. This one is a little different because it's during this very transformative period we're living through.
So we're not, Mr. Chair, if I could, it's really obvious to me that I am not tracking with with Dan. So I just want to be clear. This staff report is asking my organization, the TAC, the management committee, the board, do they think that MetroPlan should offer an opinion on this project or not? So the TAC thinks we should step up. I want to know if the management committee thinks we should step up. I want to know if the board thinks we should step up. What we step up with is a completely different question that we don't even get to unless people say that they want MetroPlan to have a role. And right now, I'm not sure there is one.
No, I understand.
Wow, thank you for that clarification. Really appreciate that.
I
And I
thought
saw
did address
Dave, your
that. Sorry, it's okay.
oh, go ahead, Dan. Go ahead.
I don't think I misunderstood the question. I'm not assuming what the recommendation is going to be. It might be the same as what the council recommended last night. It might not. I think my comments were to that point, but I don't think I was missing the point.
All right, thank you, Dan. Dave, go ahead first, and then Rick right after.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Dan, thank you for your comments. And what I'm hearing from Dan is it's not so much, should we make a case today, but I think it's more about maybe even kind of sequence of events and how we arrive at a recommendation should we choose to make one. And in terms of sequence, quite often city staff are asked to make a recommendation. In the case of Lone Tree Overpass, I think what I heard was, no, they really didn't. And they may actually be asked not to make a recommendation. And yet here in the MetroPlan process, they may, through, I'll put it in quotes, I'll say quotes for the record, may offer a recommendation or contribute to a recommendation that they otherwise would be prevented from doing or directed not to participate in as we put our recommendation together. And so it could put staff in a difficult position. And so I think Dan's question is about, if we were to make a recommendation, how do we arrive at that? Is it through the TAC process, TAC management committee and board, or is it through just, yes, we would recommend staff make their, offer their professional recommendation, leave it at that, or is it, as Miles, you suggested, perhaps on a case-by-case basis, where, city staff, to use that as the example, can let us know, hey, we're permitted to participate in this, or we have been directed not to participate. So that's where I see Dan coming from, and just want to offer that. So thank you.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate that. And just want to remind everyone on the TAC, in the interest of time, I want to make sure that we're moving through the rest of the agenda, because I know we have a few more items that we need to discuss. And unless there's any objective to that, Rick, I'll give you the last word on this topic.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to thank Dan for his insight, his comments. Feel very supported in all this and really appreciate it. I think, as I stated earlier, sorry for the redundancy, Mr. Chair, I think that MetroPlan has to stand behind the modeling and would expect MetroPlan to continue to play that role. And to Dan's point, that may not have to, that may just be MetroPlan staff's professional opinion, and it may not be a TAC Management Committee e-board thing. Yeah, to the point that, you know, staff didn't make a recommendation, tie it back to my LOS comment. It's really hard well, I'm going to say it is against our code for staff to have recommended an alternate or an option that did not meet level of service D or better, which is our code. And clearly council was interested in, you know, how many lanes. It's literally that arbitrary. Now, granted, that ties back to pedestrian and bicycle prioritization, but it really is arbitrary relative to level of service. So anyhow, yeah, that now you know the story. I mean, staff hasn't made a recommendation, but Mr. Chair, I will end with a positive comment. And that is that in talking with our consultants today, we are confident that, you know, with a little more refinement to the modeling, and Dave, we're going to be coming to ask for some of your help here. But we're confident that now that we've gotten clear direction that 5 legs per leg is the maximum number of lanes that council's willing to see, we're recognizing that if we do 2 left turn lanes and eliminate a right turn lane, a dedicated right, that is, let the rights happen out of a through lane, we can meet the 5 lanes per leg criteria. And we believe that we can bring it in at level of service D, and it would only be in the opening year and things crash in a horizon year, but no pun intended there, and I apologize for that. But yeah, so the optimism is I think we can thread this needle, or at least I'm going to remain hopeful that we can thread this needle. Just some information there for all to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. I really appreciate that. And Miles, I saw your comment in the chat. So actually, I will give the closing comment to you on the Lone Tree Overpass presentation.
Thank you. I just want to acknowledge, I think I finally did get, Dan, thanks for your comment, Dave, Wessel on it. And what I will say is, if MetroPlan goes forth with a recommendation on a design, it will come through the TAC and the management committee and the board before anything goes forward. I would want to do that only with consensus of the groups. Thank you.
Thank you, Miles. Really appreciate that. Okay, that was a great conversation. Thank you for all the input and comments on the Lone Tree Overpass presentation. Before we move on to item E, I want to circle back to item C, the Unified Planning Work Program Amendment. I'd like us to address a comment that was made by Rick in the chat. Rick, let me give you the floor on that, just to talk about that comment you made.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair, and I apologize for the afterthought, but I was wondering, since, you know, the net difference is going to be what it is there a way that the $310K that is going to be committed to the downtown mile project, can that just end up being $36,138 less to avoid this IGA step? Or, I mean, Dave, I defer to you. I mean, I know that there's, you know, policy and procedure at play, rules to follow, and apologize for the question if it's already been discussed.
Mr. Chair, I'll start and then defer to Miles, since Rick kind of directed that to me. Match has to be provided, and so that needs to be committed to. All right. So I don't know that we can avoid that. It may be, you know, it was $1 million, I think, application for raise grant. We're looking at putting up as an organization almost half of that. Anticipate, you know, that's still closer to the figure that's actually needed. So, you know, is the city going to, you know, try to pare down the scope to meet the money that we have available? They're going to try to kind of overmatch, if you will, because they see the size of that. You know, whichever way the money flows, if it flows from us to you or you to us, we need that agreement in place to kind of codify that arrangement. So I don't know that there's a way to avoid the paperwork, so to speak. Miles, you want to add anything to that?
I don't, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm satisfied. Appreciate the backup.
No problem. Thank you. All right, let's move on to item E, the Transportation Survey 2022 report. Miles, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the TAC. Looking at the time, I'm questioning just out loud here with you, Mr. Chairman, if this is the best use of our time. The survey is done. People have received a copy of it. It's got great information. We could move this to next month, I think, and that's a question, and maybe Dave sees it differently than I. Or at least maybe we could move through some of the items first and then circle back to this one with the time we have left.
Okay, I have no issue with that. Per your recommendation, we can we can move on to, unless there's any objection from the TAC, we can just move right to item F, the Strive Forward Branding and Outreach Update. Dave, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll look to Miles. Do we want to jump to the Sustainable Transportation Toolbox and make sure we get that in hand?
Why don't we? That's a really good point. Thank you. Mr. Chair, can we jump to the next item?
Absolutely. Unless there's any objection from the TAC, go for it. Item G, Sustainable Transportation Toolbox Update. Who wants to go first, Miles or Dave?
I think I'll kick it off briefly.
All right.
And Dave is much deeper in this and has a lot of details. Ultimately today, though, we are recommending that the TAC adopt scope of work for the Sustainable Transportation Toolbox. And as you may recall, well, first, our work plan says we got to do this Stride Forward plan, and we want to develop approach for maintaining vehicle miles traveled. And as you recall, we have a mini grant process. Sustainability applied for the mini grant to do a sustainability toolbox. This group, last time we met, considered that and approved sending the money to sustainability, as did the management committee, as did the board. So we started to work out a scope of work for what exactly would be accomplished through that effort. I'm going to circle back to Dave in a minute. What I want to just share with all of you, and I think it's attached in this packet. I'm going to scroll. No, it's not. So I apologize for not including the packet. Let me just say that Nicole Antonopoulos and I worked through and signed an intention letter to basically spell out. Oh, it is. It's linked. Let me see if it comes up for you. I want to acknowledge this feels like one of the clunkiest meetings I've been in with TAC in a while, and I want to say it's because so many of us were up past midnight on the LTOP thing. My brain is feeling really full. So if I'm not as crisp as usual, I apologize. And let me just try to get this document up. All right, it's not there. So let me just, I apologize. I'm going to just say it this way. Nicole and I signed an intentions letter to get clear on how we were going to be partnering. I feel really good about it. And that one of the items in that intentions letter about how we work together is that a scope of work will be developed. And that's something that Dave, Wessel, and Jenny have been working on. So to you, Dave.
Thank you. Thank you, Miles. And so if you recall, the original grant application was for a VMT calculator. And in discussions with Jenny and Jenny Neiman from Sustainability, Martin Ince, and Nicole, this really determined a couple things. One is that the new transportation model should do a solid job of estimating VMT and properly applied could help in analyzing VMT impacts of development. And so the scope was adapted. So it retains the idea that there's going to be kind of a kickoff workshop with peer experts, inviting not just city staff, but local consulting engineers that were, kind of bring and planning staff to kind of bring everybody along with this idea of transformative transportation and how to adapt our system of doing things. Then it would be evaluating as I said, the model for how it works, and maybe and then to augment that model. You'll recall that Seth Contreras from the consulting team presented our literature review for Stride Forward, including impact, VMT estimates and TDM impacts to augment any kind of use of the model with a tool that incorporates those elements. And then the next part, and this is really what I feel is key, is helping to develop some performance metrics, perhaps even targets, that form this middle policy ground where you can see at the bottom of the screen here, we start enumerating some of the many policies that we have in place through the regional plan, the carbon neutrality plan, the Blueprint 2040, and other things. So we have some great high-level policies, and we have some pretty decent development regulations, but this middle ground is missing, and we really need to develop many of those kind of performance metrics and standards. And one that I come back to often is the idea of subdivision regulations that would just help describe how frequently should we have trails and crossings, even road network standards. None of that is enumerated, and so it's very difficult to require those things of developers. We have had lots of conversations about crosswalks. How frequent should they be? There's been a lot of work in the ATMP and RTPs about different conditions on roadways and the types of crosswalks that you would employ to address those. None of those are codified. And so it's really establishing this middle ground performance policy. And that's really the bulk of what's described in this as phase one. And a little different approach, and I'll spring this on you now, is we really feel that this phase one that I've just described is very much in keeping with the work that's being done under the RTP, Stride Forward, trying to say Stride Forward, not RTP, and that we feel it's appropriate for this phase one to be a change order. MetroPlan would continue then to manage under the Stride Forward contract, that team, but in terms of this change order, a lot of coordination, consultation, and direction from sustainability and city staff. So what remains then is phase two in the scope that's presented. And that's really moving from this middle ground in phase one to saying, okay, what are the code changes that we need to best implement these performance metrics and targets? And we felt that was sufficiently different enough from the work under Stride Forward that it really needed to be separate, and has been confirmed by sustainability that they are making a request to City Council to fund that phase, and that would be under a separate city procurement process. So I hope that adequately describes the path forward here. I'll turn it back to Miles at this time to see if there's anything he'd like to add or anything that he'd like me to clarify.
I don't, just to say that we would like the TAC to adopt this or give us feedback so we can amend it, so we can move forward with your support. We don't want to move forward without your support.
Understood. Thank you, Miles. Appreciate it. Thank you, Dave. Really appreciate that. Couple of things. First and foremost, want to just let everyone at TAC know that in the chat, Mandia did provide a direct link to the shared intentions document for your reference. And the second thing, before I open it up to the TAC for comments and input on this Sustainability Transportation Toolbox update, I want to, Jenny, I want to give you an opportunity to add any additional comments or anything if you have any.
Mr. Chair, I believe she may be not be able to respond verbally. She does have some comments in the chat to that effect.
Yeah, I can respond quickly. I'll keep it really brief. I am at the dentist. So a huge thank you to Dave. A huge thank you to all of you for your prior support. And I just so appreciate the support and taking this leap with us. I will respond to everything else in the chat. Thanks all.
Oh, thank you, James. I was not aware, Dave. Sorry about that. So, all right, excellent. All right, with that said, I want to open it up to our TAC members for any questions, comments, or input. Go ahead, Ann.
Thanks, Jason. Dave, I just want to say I really, from I think a Mountain Line perspective, really appreciate that this gap in policy, the middle level has been identified and you're scoping this with the city. I think all of us have seen sort of the classic break between a vision on a plan, on a big project or an initiative versus implementation and the how and how it actually happens from the technical standards and the delivery. And there is a gap. And so I think you're on a great track with trying to vet more of that, the when and the how much of the infrastructure and not noodling into the exact details of what they're building, which is, maybe still needs some updates, but really I think that would help a lot on some of these big corridor projects to help technical staff from the policy level to the, technical teams trying to figure it out to deliver a project. So I think it's on a really good track. One question I did have, you mentioned a greenhouse gas, maybe it's not this scope of work, calculator. Is that something that's being done under this or is that the other scope?
Member Dunno, it will be part of this. It's the VMT calculator, and why VMT is important is its relationship to GHG or greenhouse gas emissions.
Gotcha. Can you explain a little bit? I mean, is that tool something that will just really be an inside technical tool that if a developer or an applicant comes forward with a project and they need analysis done on a project, that a city or a public entity would actually do the calculations, or is it going to be a tool that is available on the city's website? I mean, what's the vision for this tool and who can use it and how?
Mr. Chair, Member Dunno,
maybe you don't know.
That's part of what we'd be looking for this consultant. Should we go, with the change order for Burgess Nipel and Farron Piers and their team to help us develop. They've done a lot of work with this in California because of the state legislation that's driving it. So they've been, I think Seth Contreras described himself as a VMT therapist. So we're looking to them to provide a lot of resource in that area. I do like the idea that it could be kind of publicly available and easily accessible by the development community as well as the general public to see what could be applied. In general, we think the transportation model can give us some fairly big picture recommendations, facilities oriented, how to apply, sidewalks, bike lanes, transit facilities, roadways. But then there's a number of things, I think I said before, it's not a sledgehammer, nor is it a scalpel in terms of a tool. but somewhere in the middle, and to kind of move it more towards the scalpel perspective, we can see from the work that Farron Pierce has already presented. There's a lot of things in the travel demand management world that could be applied, and some of these may be applied technically. Some of them might be applied from a more policy level. If you contribute to this program, we'll give you credits. Where it's hard to really dial down just how much is that going to do for VMT, but we'll say but it may be just a policy decision that we believe this will contribute towards VMT, as well as broader issues like just kind of quality of life, and we want to see those things happen. So that's the kind of thing we're looking to achieve. I'm looking at the participant screen here, and glad that Dan Folk and Michelle McNulty and other city staff are present as we are moving down this path. So thank you.
All right, Rick, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll start off again with an apology if I missed it, but is there a deliverable that would look like a revision to the engineering standards in terms of TIAs that applies to capital and private development projects in either of the phases?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Barrett, definitely in phase 2. I'll say possibly in phase 1. Okay. The city in particular, I'll say perhaps all of our member agencies are not big on targets. ADOT, I'll suggest, because of some of the federal mandates, is looking at some very high level targets. We've adopted some of those, but really have not set targets, thresholds, or even broad performance metrics in that middle ground. One of the questions I do have, which is why I say phase 2 possibly, is just how is that middle ground policy adopted? What does that look like? What's the form and the process? So that's going to be part of the discussion. And again, for phase 2, those are regulatory amendments. So, and in the scope, it has some such as zoning code changes, engineering standard changes, including the TIA process, and subdivision code as kind of examples of things that really need to be brought into line with the higher level policy, as well as this new, to be established middle ground policy. Does that answer your question?
It does. It leads me to another one. I think my understanding is that phase 2 is the mini grant, and phase 1 will be a change order to Burgess and Nyepel.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Barrett, actually, phase 1 is the mini grant. There was discussion with at least the management committee and executive board, I believe with the TAC as well, that for procurement reasons, to expedite this, it would be easier for a MetroPlan to procure phase 1. We think phase 1 is very much in keeping with the original application, and hence the intentions letter that Miles described, to make sure that the city is kept very much at the forefront of this process. Phase 2 will be city funded and city procured. I'll put a caveat there. We have yet to negotiate with Burgess and Nyepel what the change order cost may be, and should there be a balance of funds, we can have the conversation about how to possibly transfer those. To your earlier question, that probably gets back into an IGA if we need to do that.
Okay, so the
Thank you.
mini grant is turned into the change order
Yes.
administered by MetroPlan. Okay. So then my last comment, Mr. Chair, no need to reply, is that I'm just hopeful that our criteria, this expanded criteria that we're working on, will continue to balance the needs of cars in addition to bike, ped, and transit. So I'm hoping that cars are not excluded. And I'm kind of drilling down on that. What's the definition of prioritized bike and ped as it relates to cars, and tying back to the vision of the MetroPlan. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Rick. Any additional comments, questions in regard to the Sustainable Transportation Toolbox update? Going once, going twice. Okay, so I see that MetroPlan is looking for adoption by the TAC for the scope of work for the Sustainability Toolbox. Miles, is that correct?
Correct.
All right, so looking for a motion to adopt the scope of work for the Sustainability Toolbox.
Member Dunno, I'll move to approve. TAC member Dunno.
Thank you. And looking for a second. Don't be shy.
Mr. Chair, this is Rick Barrett. I will second Member Dunno's motion.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, have it.
All right. Excellent. All in favor of adopting the scope of work for the Sustainability Toolbox, please say aye.
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 And all opposed? Motion carries. Okay. So with the remainder, I know we have 30 minutes left. We have till 3:30 p.m. for this TAC meeting. I would recommend the only remaining agenda item that needs an action by the TAC, I see, is item E, the Transportation Survey 2022 report. I would recommend that we go to that particular item and address that. Everything else is informational, so as time allows, we'll get to all of those. Miles, do you have any objection to that?
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the question and your logic that this is the action item. I'm struggling here because the information in the other items is so interesting. And the presentation we had is actually a recording of Dr. Fred Solop going through the survey line by line, as he did this morning with our advisory group. And it takes about 20 minutes to watch that video. So I'm struggling here a bit, wondering if, let me just test a couple of things with you and the TAC members if I can. Has the group had a chance to review this item? Would you be comfortable with, you know what, never mind, this isn't working. There's not a way to shortcut this. I mean, I'm trying to get us through it all, but I can't. So I think the best way to do it is we'll just do as you suggest, Mr. Chair, and put the video up instead of me taking time that the video could be filling.
Okay, and does anyone from the TAC have any objections to that? Just want to make sure we're hitting the important items to attack before proceeding. Hearing none. All right, let's go on to E. Go ahead with the presentation, Miles.
Hey, with everybody. So thanks, whoever it is that's controlling the screen here. So let's go to the next screen. This is basic information about the methodology. We conducted a telephone survey of Flagstaff area residents. There were 412 surveys were collected from within the boundaries of Flagstaff, 262 surveys from residents living outside Flagstaff, and we looked at a 10-mile perimeter around the city. This was conducted in November. The lengths of data collection are a little extended, longer than normal, largely because of two factors. One was we ran into some difficulties just gathering surveys from outside the Flagstaff area, but we were able to accomplish that. And we hit Thanksgiving, so we didn't want to obviously survey on Thanksgiving. Next. Again, we're looking at values. That's the particular purpose of this. And the values are values which would, that are held by local area residents that would inform planning and to the future inform decision-making. We first asked people to rate the importance of local features of the Flagstaff area. And this is a great chart just to begin to tell you that if you look at the red, that's the combined Flagstaff area. That's all the data. If you look at the yellow, that's the residents within Flagstaff itself. And then the blue are people outside of Flagstaff. So we were able to separate out inside Flagstaff, outside Flagstaff, and then bring them all together for a combined perspective. This chart is ordered by the combined Flagstaff viewpoints. And essentially here what we're seeing is an ordering. There's not a very wide range. We asked people to rate the importance on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being very important, 1 being not important. And you can see though some ordering of opinions. And people are looking first at providing good schools. That's the most important value to them. Then we have protecting scenic beauty, protecting clean air, creating economic opportunities. There's a clustering there of opinion because they're all very similarly rated. The last cluster would be developing parks and outdoor recreation opportunities. And then providing a good transportation system falls at the end of this list. Still rated important. We're in the 7 range on a scale of 1 to 10, but not rated as important as these other features. So next screen, please. We're looking at values, and we presented a question to people about what vision, what scenario for a community they prefer. Do you prefer to live in a community where houses are larger and further apart, but you have to drive to get to stores, restaurants, shopping? Or do you prefer to live in a community where houses are smaller, they're closer together, and you can walk to stores, restaurants, shopping? On the left, we see the national opinion. This is Pew Research data, and that's where we got this. We plucked this question from Pew. And when we look at the nation as a whole, 60% of the population prefer larger houses, 39% smaller. When we looked at the combined Flagstaff area, we see very divided opinions on this question. So again, we're combined Flagstaff. 49% are saying they prefer the scenario with larger houses. 47% prefer the scenario with smaller houses, and shops, restaurants are within walking distance. Next slide. This gives a sense of how we can work with the data. We have inside now versus outside Flagstaff. And inside Flagstaff, 43% say larger houses, but 54% we're skewing more to the smaller houses in the walkable community. But outside Flagstaff, we're seeing a deviation from that. Outside Flagstaff, 3/4 of residents are saying they prefer the larger houses scenario. Next slide, please. We ask people to think of their weekly travel time as 100%. Okay, you travel, regardless of whether you travel 5 hours a week, you travel 100 hours a week. Think of your entire travel time as 100%. What percentage of that time is allocated to using an automobile? What percentage for walking, bicycling, public transit, something else? Overwhelmingly, we can see, again, if you look at the red lines, more than 3/4 of folks are saying that they use a car for 3/4 of transportation time is automobile dependent. And that's higher for people living outside Flagstaff. 88% of travel time outside Flagstaff is dependent on a car. A distant second in this chart is walking, followed by bicycling and public transportation. We're in the single digits with bicycling and public transportation. Next slide, please. For those people who are dependent on a car for more than 50% of their travel time, we asked, how do you, what on a daily basis, what do you use your car for? Why do you need a car? What do you use it for? And regardless of whether someone's living inside or outside Flagstaff, 2/3 of the population are saying they need it. They need their car to drive to work. The second use of the car is grocery shopping, gathering supplies for the house. And third would be running errands. And that's followed by driving kids to school, driving myself to school. But overwhelmingly, we're seeing, regardless of where one lives, people are using the car to drive to work, followed by grocery shopping and then running errands. Next slide, please. We looked at, we were able to take the data and say, what is the preferred form of transportation for the individual? And here we're looking at, where's the majority of their time spent? Is it spent in a car? Is it spent walking? Is it spent bicycling? And consistent with the previous slide we looked at, 88% in the combined Flagstaff, 95% outside Flagstaff prefer the car. The car is the preferred form of transportation. If we go to the next slide, this was an important teasing out of the data because for depending upon what form of transportation people preferred, we asked them about different features of their preferred form of transportation. We were trying to understand, why does someone prefer a car? Why does someone prefer a bicycle? Why does someone prefer walking? And there's a lot of data here, but if we go to the next slide, I've summarized this data. And I've looked at whether how the data falls. So for cars, people are saying very positive ratings for saves time, safety, and necessity, that they use their car, they prefer using their car because it saves time. It's quicker to do what they need to do. It's safe, it's a safe form of transportation, and it's defined as a necessity. For those who prefer using a bicycle, they look at that bicycle as cost. It's a cheap form of transportation. It's inexpensive. It's environmentally friendly. It provides health benefits. Ooh, we could just, thank you. Whoever's the hidden hand here. It provides health benefits and it's enjoyable. They enjoy using a bicycle. Walking, again, seen as environmentally friendly, seen as benefiting their personal health, and it's enjoyable. And for those who are dependent on public transit, that they look at public transit as a safe form of transportation, an inexpensive form of transportation. It's environmentally friendly. And for those who are dependent on public transportation, they see it as a necessity. That's a very positive rating. So again, we're looking at the underlying values for one's chosen form, preferred form of transportation. If we could go to the next slide, please. So we asked people, if you recall the earlier slide, we asked people to take 100% of their travel time. How is it allocated? What percentage goes to car, walking, bicycling, public transit? And then we asked people, now project, we're thinking 10 years down the road, 10 years down the road, how do you anticipate your travel time to look? What will your travel profile be? What percentage of your traveling will be using a car, automobile? So the blue line is the current profile. Again, this is the combined Flagstaff data. The blue line is the current profile. And the red line indicates where people anticipate and where they're willing to go into the future. And this is a very interesting slide when we're comparing data, because we see a 20% reduction in the use of an automobile. That people can imagine down the road, 10 years, automobile will be a smaller percentage of their travel profile. And they anticipate, they can imagine walking more, bicycling more, taking public transit more, that these other forms of transportation take on larger proportion of their travel time. If we could go to the next slide, please. So I was very interested in looking specifically for the automobile people, where we saw a 20% reduction over time in automobile usage. I looked at the data and I sorted it out by people who said 5% or more reduction in their travel time using the automobile. So I wanted to look at that population. Who's more willing to change their profile? Who's less willing to change their profile? So I divided the population up to switchers, people who were willing to save 5% or more change in the use of an automobile, versus non-switchers, people who are pretty similar across the 10 years. And we get a sense of the proportion of switchers versus non-switchers for different demographics. And just looking quickly at this, residents of Flagstaff, a larger proportion of residents of Flagstaff are willing to be switchers. 2/3 of people living inside Flagstaff were saying 5%, there'd be a 5% or more reduction in their usage of an automobile. Outside Flagstaff, it was evenly divided, roughly evenly divided. Liberals, 3/4 of liberals were willing to switch, to change, think about changing their profile, think about reducing their time in a car. Moderates, it's a little more divided. Conservatives, more balanced toward non-switchers. Age, there's an age impact here as well, that, excuse me, young people, middle-aged people, if I can say that, about 2/3 are willing to say that they're likely to switch. Older respondents were more divided, and in fact, a majority said they were not as willing to think about reducing their time in a car by 5% or more. Time in Flagstaff, we're seeing a curvilinear relationship here. That's actually people who have been here 4 to 10 years who can imagine reducing their travel time by automobile 5% or more. And then women more likely than men to entertain reducing their profile of automobile usage. If we can go to the next slide, thank you. We asked people to evaluate the current transportation system, and we defined the current transportation system as being roads, buses, sidewalks, bike lanes, and the urban trail system. And overall, for the population of the area, there's a positive understanding of a positive rating of the current transportation system. 78%, more than 3/4, are saying that this meets their needs very well or somewhat well. That's a positive rating, as opposed to 21%, 1 out of 5, who are saying it's more negative. And this feeds back to, if you recall the initial slide with priorities, where current transportation system was a little lower. I think the current transportation system is a little lower of a priority, generally because people have positive feelings about our current system. If we could go to the next slide, please. A division between people living inside Flagstaff versus living outside Flagstaff. Combining very well and somewhat well. For people living inside the Flagstaff boundaries, 82% are offering a positive rating to the current transportation system. For people living outside the Flagstaff boundaries, we're at 54%, so just over a majority are giving a positive rating. More negative ratings for people living outside Flagstaff. Next slide. Looking into the future, what are the transportation priorities? We asked people to rate each priority on a scale, the importance of the priority on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being most important. And here we have an ordering of priorities. Again, everything was in the positive range, 7.4% or higher. I'm sorry, 7.4 on a scale from 1 to 10 or larger. But if we look at the ordering, roads and sidewalks, pretty closely related. The urban trail system, a priority, going down to priorities, bike lanes, and then buses are seen as a little lesser of a priority, though still a priority. And if we can go to the next screen, we divided this up by people living inside Flagstaff versus outside Flagstaff. The ordering was very similar. The ordering was the same. The range was different. More of an emphasis on roads as a priority for people living outside Flagstaff. Recall earlier data, a larger percentage of the transportation profile is using an automobile. People are more automobile dependent, less willing to switch from using an automobile to something else. So roads are seen as a greater priority for people living outside Flagstaff. And the transit system is lesser of a priority than people living inside Flagstaff. For people living inside Flagstaff, the range between roads and buses, though we can still see an ordering here, the range is very similar. So very little difference. Next slide, please. The third area of inquiry involved climate change. And we were trying to understand, we're trying to benchmark the area population on where they were on attitudes regarding climate change. And we provided 3 scenarios. We asked people to select, or 3 statements. We asked people to select the statement that most closely represents their opinion, their perspective. And the range of statements was climate change is happening, but little can be done about it. Climate change is happening and it needs to be addressed right away, or climate change is not happening. And here we see that most people are falling into or most people, 94% are saying climate change is happening, looking at the combined Flagstaff bar here. The climate change is happening, about 3% are saying it's not happening. And that 3% is consistent for inside Flagstaff. Outside Flagstaff, 8% are saying climate change is not happening. Most people are saying climate change is happening and it needs to be addressed, 3/4 of the population. About 1 in 5, roughly, for combined Flagstaff are saying climate change is happening, but nothing can be done about it. But there is a perception that climate change is there. For people who said climate change is happening, if we can go to the next slide, we asked them to anticipate impacts on their family into the future. And more than a majority of this population are saying they anticipate a great deal of impact on their families into the future. And about 1/4 are saying they anticipate moderate impact on their family. So again, a sense that climate change is happening and understanding that that will impact them to some degree, whether it's a moderate amount or a great deal. So another value, underlying attitudes toward transportation in the community. If we can go to the next slide, it's our final questions. I apologize for running through the data so quickly, but I'm open to hearing questions if there's still time on our agenda.
Okay, Mandia, could you stop the video? All right, never tried that before. It felt like Fred was in the meeting with us. We have 6 minutes left. I thought, Mr. Chair, okay with you, and see if anyone in this room actually has questions.
Absolutely. So I will open that up to attack. Any questions or comments on the presentation?
Jason, this is.
Go ahead, Ann.
Thank you, Mr. Salah. That was very informative, and I really like your vernacular about switch versus not switch and putting the categories like that. My question actually is a little bit more maybe for MetroPlan. It's maybe you don't have an answer now, but there's obviously appears to be a clear delineation between kind of our rural versus city community, if you will, that was included in the survey. And so I'm wondering from a regional transportation aspect, how you're going to look at the survey and incorporate it into some of the RTP discussions.
Mr. Chair, I think that's an excellent, Member Nemo, that's an excellent question. We have the onward and upward scenarios, kind of the stay the course, and then a more ambitious sustainability aspect. Part of what we were looking to do through our surveys, both this one that was reported in our online surveys, is to report out, kind of public perspective, or what we believe perspective will be based on the surveys of different approaches as well, whether it's TDM or response to types of facility or investments. And I think we can break that out by, not just city, county, but, urban, suburban, rural, in terms of not only how effective we think they will be from a technical perspective, but what that public perception will be of, will they accept them or not. And part of this is as well is to try to get some order of magnitude in these different areas that will allow us to maybe identify more effective strategies or ones that we would come out early with, whether there's a tipping point, in terms of the level of endorsement. So that's how we will be using this data, at least one of the ways.
Excellent. And I see Rick put in the chat that he's impressed by the depth of the survey questions and strategies. So well done to the MP team. So thank you, Rick, for that comment. Any additional comments or questions? And your hand still raised. Do you have any more? Okay, just wanted to double check. Any more questions or comments? Go ahead, Jeff.
Thanks. If I can sneak in real quick. I agree. That was pretty neat with the level of detail. I had two questions. One, I think I saw in the packet, and I think you just mentioned it, Dave, that there's another survey coming out, and I'm kind of curious, what does that mean? Because this one just was finished, kind of how they differentiate. And maybe you said that before, but I didn't catch it. And then I don't remember ever seeing the question kind of, here's what you do today, and here's what you expect to do in 10 years with your travel patterns. Is there any comparables to that? Have we asked that question, 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Do other places ask that question? It's really interesting. That's all I got. Hopefully you can answer in 90 seconds.
Yeah, so we're getting ready to launch an online survey. Actually, it's live now through the city's community forum. And that's digging into some of these questions. So when we asked, is it a necessity? Why is it a necessity to drive your car? You feel it's safe. Why? How do you feel it's safer? Things like that. So we're digging deeper and try to build off these things. We're asking some similar questions or identical questions so we can kind of ground truth, use this random sample survey to ground truth what we're hearing through the online stuff in terms of, is it random? Is it skewed? As far as the current versus future, I think that's somewhat unique. We can ask Dr. Salop if you've seen that before. And I'll just make this observation. And I think, Jeff, you were in on the phone call with Portland, but I think the after figures are very similar to what Portland is actually achieving now in terms of trip mode distribution. So thank you.
Excellent. Any additional comments or questions in regards to the Transportation Survey 2022 report? Okay, so we are looking for a motion for the TAC today to adopt the 2022 Transportation Survey final report. So looking for that motion.
I'll make that motion to adopt the report on the survey. This is Dan.
Thank you, Dan, and looking for a second.
I'll second. This is Ann.
Thank you, Ann. All in favor of adopting the 2022 Transportation Survey final report, please say aye.
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 And all opposed? Motion carries. Excellent. So we got about 1 more minute left. I know today we weren't able to get to item F, the Site Forward Branding and Outreach Update. Item H, the Sun Transport Solutions Corporation Update. And item I, the federal and state funding update. However, the memos on those items is provided in the agenda packet for your reference. And with that said, before I conclude this TAC meeting today, Miles, I just want to give you any closing comments you would have.
Thank you for sharing the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for your time working through this material.
All right, thank you. And with that said, the time is now 3:30 p.m. We'll adjourn the TAC meeting. Thank you, everyone, for your time and participation. Always appreciate it. You all have a wonderful day and wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. By the way, Mandia, great job today. Great job today getting through that slide. We got to hear you more next time.
I
gotta
know,
hear you
I
more.
know.
I'm just going to let you know the next TAC meeting, I'm going to call on you for a few things. I'm going to do it.
Just do it.
I'm looking at my notes like, damn it, I didn't call on Mandy. I was like, yeah, so I'm gonna make up for that next TAC meeting. I just want to
Okay,
let you know
thank you.
that.
Well, on the back end, I'm helping out Rosie while she's gone. So it's nice to be able to take notes every now and then, and certainly learn from everybody here, and yeah, getting deep in it. So yeah, happy to participate where I can.
Awesome. Well, MetroPlan is lucky to have you. So
Okay.
great having you on that team. So.
All right. Thank you. You have a good day.
Hey, you too. You take care. Have a great day and a great weekend.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
Bye.